Okay. Well, I think we were really lucky tonight to be able to listen to such amazing presentations. I certainly learned a lot. Fascinating, useful, relevant. So thank you both.
Sure, thank you.
We have some time now to hear from you all, and we have a compilation of questions that came in through Akhil and Ron's talk. So let's go ahead and get started. So let me start. So this is for Akhil. How do I make time for all this health stuff? I'm always behind what I need to deal with.
What was the last part?
I'm always behind on what I need to deal with. And I'll also add a comment about this. I think that there is a real tension in our current culture in Silicon Valley between self-care and the productivity model that our companies encourage. And in fact, how can you actually use self-care and time for self-care as a driver for increased productivity in the business world?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I would say that, I'm always behind too. And I think this is not something that is a unique problem, because I think it's something we all face. I would just say a couple of things. I think one is to just really prioritize these factors, for their impact on their health. And then the second thing is, I think, focus on the positive benefits of making these changes, like increased energy, maybe weight loss. If you just make some small changes and notice some of those positive outcomes, I think that'll be motivating more than thinking about the fear of not doing these things.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think some of the things that really have added evidence to this is when you look at functional MRI scans of people that work for hours at a time multitasking, their frontal cortex shuts off. That's the CEO part of their brain. Even after 20 to 30 minutes of multitasking, your higher level functions shut down. When I've seen those functional MRI scans, and we know what that's like, so we have anatomical evidence of that. So now, incorporating things like rest and all the behavioral principles, it really does optimize brain function quite a bit, and that's really what we're trying to do. And I think companies are starting to figure that out. They're giving employees time for meditation, for rest. They're seeing that productivity and overall health improve from that. But hopefully, we can really shift away from that sort of, hyperactive lifestyle and really incorporate some more rest.
Excellent. Okay. So next question, which I think after you hear so much information about healthy behavior change, like it's overwhelming. Where do you start? I mean, it's hard to think of making so many changes at once. So Ron, this is actually a question for you, and then Akhil, it'd be helpful to hear your response as well. So many things here. What is the best place to start?
So I think the best place to start is whatever causes the least resistance. So for a lot of I saw a patient today who basically is going to be going on a lot of traveling trips, and he's not going to be able to do the exercises the way he wants to. So we just identified one of his problem meals, which is breakfast, and we just are going to try to fix that. If you start with those small changes, they can improve energy levels. You can already see metabolic improvements. I think my old practice, when I started, I was an enthusiastic doctor, and I gave 4 or 5 things for patients to do. You just get fatigued, right, if it's too many things. So pick one thing that you can do and stick to, small amounts, even if it's 5 minutes of meditation a day. Build that into a habit, and then try to expand on that, rather than try to take because again, we're type A Silicon Valley. We want everything done at one time. We want to be able to accomplish all these goals, but it just doesn't work that way. So,
I would say get a dog. No.
Okay, yeah, there we go. Thank you. We could do that.
No, but I think it's that point of social connection. That's what I would focus on, because I do think that is such a fundamentally important area, and whether it's through a pet or focusing on human connections with family, friends, people that you're close to, I think that's an area where you could potentially add a lot of richness to your life and benefit your health, and I think it's an easy place to start.
I think this is another interesting question. This is for Ron, but really relevant for both of you guys. But what is a simple belief that will support my health?
Simple belief that will support my health. I think everyone has their own individual beliefs, and it's got to be something that will resonate. I know for me personally, none of the things, for me, if I'm not optimizing my health, the first thing is I see that my relationship with my kids, my wife, my family suffers. So for me, my number one priority is to be a good role model for my kids and my family. And I see when I'm under stress, I'm not exercising, that gets compromised. And then beyond that, it's just a greater, good of just, being a good positive role model, not just for my kids, but for my patients. But again, for other people, it's something different. It might be something else that resonates with them, but that's sort of one of my personal beliefs. I don't know if you have any other thoughts.
Yeah, I think one belief that I think is very important is the idea that your body can heal itself. And I actually see many patients in my practice who tell me that I'm the first doctor who's told them that actually they can get better. Because I work in integrative medicine, and we're often the 7th or 8th doctor that a patient has seen, and they're not getting better. But I think it is true that our body has a self-healing ability, and that's something that Ayurveda really emphasizes. And so I think realizing that all these simple changes in diet and lifestyle really can tap into that healing power of your body. So I think that's a simple but very powerful belief.
Yeah, excellent. I think this is a question that many of us here ask, especially when we're looking at the bills that come from Whole Foods and Draeger's. And how important is organic for veggies? Akil, if you want to comment.
Sure. Yeah, I think that with organic food, I think in general it is a good idea to try to switch more to organic. There's a nonprofit called the Environmental Working Group, which has released a list called the Dirty Dozen, which is the 12 fruits and vegetables that are highest in pesticides. So you can just go online and find that. It's also on Dr. Ron's blog. So for those 12, definitely you want to get organic. And then they have the Clean 15, which is the 15 plants that are the lowest in pesticides. So for those, you can actually get non-organic, conventional. I think it includes things anything which you're peeling, like a banana or avocado. I think in that case it's probably okay, not to get organic. Also with nuts, generally they have a shell that is discarded by the time you're eating the nut. So I believe that with a lot of nuts, it's probably okay. So I would use those as guidelines for organic.
There's also a question about what good quality carbs are. So Ron, maybe you want to take that one. What would you call a good quality carb?
So good quality is what Akil showed, normal starches. So plant-based carbs are basically good quality. Because, I did take care, and I still do take care of a lot of athletes that come in, and they're using gel packs and sort of processed type carbs as fuel. And the problem with that is even though they're carbs, if you look at them as 100 grams of a gel pack carb versus 100 grams of a starch, the effects on your body are completely different. It's not the same carb as that. When your body and your mitochondria are burning artificial sources of carbohydrates, it creates a lot of reactive byproducts. It's a lot of pollution that develops from that. So that's why you have to make sure you're really focusing on the high quality plant-based starches and starchy tubers, sweet potatoes, regular potatoes. As much as I know I sort of go off on rice sometimes, rice is still a very natural starch, and if you're physically active enough, it's well digested, it's an excellent starch as well too, so yeah.
So that's talking about eating food, but what about not eating food? So there were some questions that came through about fasting, and this is, I think, at that point, it does seem like it would stress our system. So why does it actually help?
Yeah, so I think, fasting has actually been around for thousands of years. It's a big part of Ayurveda and, many religious traditions. But it's often difficult to do. So intermittent fasting basically has been shown to have the same benefits of fasting, which are improved metabolic parameters, improvement in your hormones. But it's a compromise because it's not as extreme as not eating for like a couple of days. But there's actually many different ways to do intermittent fasting. One of the most common is restricting your food intake to a certain window of time, like maybe an 8-hour window or a 10-hour window during the day for a few days a week. So you might eat most of your food between, say, like noon and 8 p.m. a couple of days a week. That's one technique. I think in my book I have like 5 different techniques of intermittent fasting, but you can pick one that works for you, I think.
Excellent. Could you say a word about supplements, too? Would you recommend supplements? So phytochemicals are difficult to get. We don't have foods as rich in phytochemicals as we did 30,000 years ago.
Yes.
So
Yeah, that's a great question. So with supplements and phytochemicals, unfortunately, the research has shown that you can't really get the same benefit from phytochemicals in supplement form. So, for example, with antioxidants, a lot of the research has shown that antioxidants in pill form can actually be harmful. But the antioxidants that you're getting from fruits and vegetables, they're never harmful, and it is really important. So for phytochemicals, I don't recommend supplements, just getting in food. And I think select supplements for specific like short-term use, maybe like vitamin D if you're low, could be appropriate. So I think with supplements, I always recommend testing, working with your doctor, and then taking them for a specific reason, a specific time, and being selective.
So Ron, this is a question for you, but there are many different apps that you'd recommended that would be helpful for people to incorporate some behavior changes. But as anybody who's tried to exercise, it can be difficult to do behavior change, or eat right, or go on a diet, or any type of thing. So how do you motivate people? How do you get people inspired to really do something that's difficult?
So, one of the neat things about having something that's quantifiable is you can see the connection right away. So if we have somebody who's measuring their steps or they're doing their squats, and we link that to, let's say, their triglyceride levels or their blood glucose, we often recheck those numbers in 2 or 3 months, and then you can see the power of that connection. If you're able to quantify your diet and you sort of reduce a macronutrient or you add more nutrient density and you recheck your risk factors, it could be your waist circumference, it could be a lipid parameter, and you see that connection, that's when you really become empowered. And that's a strategy I use, because a lot of times we give very generic advice, eat healthier, exercise more, and you'll do fine. But if we can really be specific, and I see a lot of engineers, so they want data, they come in with spreadsheets, right? So I'm like, let's add some value to these spreadsheets. Let's match your walking steps to your glucose control. If you can really connect the dots there, it's very powerful. Once you see the triglycerides drop 50 points by changing your breakfast, now what do we do next? And then they naturally feel more energetic. Now taking the walking steps is a lot easier. So that'd be sort of the strategy, yeah.
Akil, this is a question for you. Could you, and we'll take a couple questions from the audience too. One question, and then we'll get to your questions. Can you say something about organic whole wheat flour? And some flour can cause inflammation in some people. There's different gluten contents in flour. It's been modified. If you could speak to that.
Oh, okay. So regarding organic whole wheat flour, I guess this question. The whole topic of gluten and wheat is a very big topic, but in general, I think that organic flour is better than conventional flour, that is still flour, and it's processed, and I think that it shouldn't be the bulk of your carbohydrates, because the bulk of your carbohydrates should be unprocessed whole either grains or legumes, vegetables, etc. So I think if you are having flour like in bread or occasionally, like as a treat, or not every single day, I think that's okay. But the bulk of the carbs shouldn't come from flour.
Excellent. I think you had a question in the audience. We'll take yours and then yours.
Hi, wonderful talk. Thank you so much for the wonderful talk to share with us. I have a question for Dr. Akil. You talked about your paleo-Vedic diet, and you said that there were different elements of it. And one of the things was in terms of having a diet specific to your body type.
Yeah.
Could you talk a little bit about that, and also tell us how can one identify the body type based on Ayurveda?
Oh, sure. Yeah, so it's basically in Ayurveda, there's 3 doshas or forces within the body, known as Vata, Pitta, and Kapha, which are roughly translated as wind, fire, and earth. And every person is born with a unique proportion of all 3. So in my book, I have a questionnaire with 20 questions to get us as a starting point to get an idea about your body type. If you work with a practitioner of Ayurveda, they'll actually spend a few hours talking to you, so it's much more in depth. But as a starting point, that would give you an idea of the body type and then the recommendations for each type. So, yeah.
Okay, and then I think in the back.
Hi. So I have a big case study for you. My boyfriend is a genetic vampire. I'm not kidding. He's plated his lung 5 times. He's allergic to sunlight because he has no melanin in his skin. Cannot see. He's red and green colorblind. Cannot smell sour milk. There's one other thing I'm forgetting. Literally not take him out in the sun. a lot of the things you're suggesting are walking in the sun and things that he really physically cannot do. Do you suggest artificial sunlight? We're already taking vitamin D, we're trying to do the things that we know, but what other suggestions would you have?
So these are specific situations where supplementation is critical, right? So I think the problem with supplementation is when people are just taking it as a replacement strategy when there's natural alternatives that are out there. But this is clearly a situation that if his vitamin D levels are compromised, then supplementation with vitamin D capsules along with vitamin D rich foods are key. So obviously he's got a skin situation that can't withstand that sort of sunlight exposure. So that'd be the key. Yeah.
Would you recommend the artificial sunlight?
I don't not think so necessarily. Yeah, I think that there's many people who can't be out in the sun, maybe like skin cancer or other reasons to get the vitamin D. And I think, of course, there are other benefits to sunlight besides vitamin D, but in this case, I wouldn't recommend artificial light. I think just vitamin D supplement.
So with the processed foods that you're talking about, if you can find other alternatives to that flour, do you think that's better? Because you're saying like almond flour, coconut flour, things like that.
Right. Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think those are probably preferable, and of course, not everybody has an issue with gluten or wheat, but many people do, and I think the gluten-free flours, there's a lot of options out there now, and there's so many gluten-free alternatives to common foods as well. So
I think we've got one more question over here, and I know there's going to be a book signing for Ron and Akil, and I know all of us need to get home to get our rest so we can perform tomorrow. So. We have a question in the red, and then you had a question down here. We'll do those two, and then we'll go ahead to the book signing.
Dr. Akil, my question is, great talk, Dr. Sinha and Dr. Akil. The question is about, I recently came across this term called nightshade vegetables, I'm not sure, and it talks about these vegetables causing inflammation or increasing the inflammation in the human body. So what is your opinion with regard to that? Is that when it comes to Ayurveda, is there a specific body type that should not be eating these kind of vegetables? Tomatoes and potatoes feature on the top of that list. So I just wanted to ask your opinion.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's actually a very good question, and there's a lot of information out there about what kinds of foods cause inflammation. You might see that, okay, all dairy causes inflammation or all nightshades cause inflammation. But I'm of the view that it's not really true that for everybody, because, for example, tomatoes and eggplant, all of this are actually are fine for many people, and it's only a subset of people that have issues with them. Maybe they have a food sensitivity, they can be tested for that with their doctor. From the Ayurvedic perspective, Pitta body type is the one which they have to be more careful with nightshades. But I think that's oversimplification, saying that nightshades are inflammatory, everybody should avoid them. No.
So one of the techniques we both prescribe when we're not sure about this is the elimination diet, where you take a lot of those elements out, gluten, nightshades, etc., and then you reintroduce each one back in again. Until you do that, it's very tough to tell what you're really intolerant to. Even with gluten, it's very interesting. I have a lot of gluten-sensitive patients, and they're only gluten-sensitive in Silicon Valley. When they go back to India, they can handle wheat. And I couldn't quite figure that out. And then I realized that for a lot of folks, gluten is sort of a cumulative impact. So when they're rested and relaxed on vacation, their gut is probably doing a little bit better when they're on vacation. They can actually handle wheat better. But here in their hectic lifestyle, they cannot handle gluten at all. So it's very personalized, and I think one of the most powerful tools is doing an elimination for at least 10 to 14 days. Take these out and then reintroduce one thing at a time and see what your body's reaction to. Because otherwise, there's the signal to noise ratio, it's just totally off. So.
I think we had one question here.
Addressing Silicon Valley syndrome, I'm curious if you've seen certain companies in Silicon Valley or in tech in general that you feel are doing this well.
Okay, I was afraid you were going to ask me the other question because I work with so many companies. I'm like, okay, I don't want to. So I'm going to make a lot of generic statements here. So I think Silicon Valley companies are doing a great job of giving a lot of benefits. They provide a very rich environment. But the thing is, you can put the gym there, you can put the car wash, you can do all that, but if you have a work environment that doesn't actually get you to the gym and really create that time for you, that's where it really falls apart. And that's my day job, as I go out to these Silicon Valley companies to sort of evaluate that environment. And I'd say the first generation, that's what it was. You know, they just give the benefits, but they wouldn't create the infrastructure. But now that these 20-something-year-olds are becoming 30, 35, and 40, and they're looking at health claims data, looking at early heart disease, now they're realizing that they really need to rethink this. They need to incentivize folks to actually use the gym or use the sleep wellness program and really create that behavior change. So some companies definitely are doing better with this, and others, unfortunately, are still sort of caught in productivity mode where it's really more of a front, sort of a showcase to have these benefits, but they're really not pushing that. But maybe I can talk to you offline about some of the companies that are good. All right, so.
Akhil, did you want to have any comments? Okay. And I can say I certainly see many patients, and I treat Silicon Valley syndrome a lot, and I think it seems to be the individuals that are most successful with combating Silicon Valley syndrome. It doesn't necessarily have to do with the company, it has to do with the individual, making the things that Akhil and Ron have talked about a priority. I often think that what if the people in business had a code of ethics like healthcare providers do, like first do no harm? Would they really be pushing their employees in the same way that they are right now? I mean, I think businesses, that people who go into that world are socialized very differently than people who are actually caring for others or caring for each other. But thank you all very, very much for being a part of this evening.